The thing is, I did not think I was choosing Mason over my husband. Mason had been my best friend before the wedding ring, before the shared apartment, before my husband ever learned how I took my coffee. I told myself a husband could be found again if marriage became small, but a man like Mason could not be replaced. So when my husband warned me that my friendship with Mason might end our marriage, I said I would think about it, then left for Miami with Mason the next morning. By the time I came home, my marriage was already waiting for me in an envelope at the airport. My name is Camilla Reyes. I was 33, and I managed operations at a private wellness clinic where calm was part of the price. The thing is, I believed I knew how to keep rooms from falling apart because I could fix a late doctor, a furious client, and a broken booking system before lunch. 2 treatment rooms, 1 waiting list. Of course, I thought that made me hard to corner. The clinic break room smelled like mint tea and disinfectant. I was standing beside the small fridge, moving staff lunches around so a VIP's cold packs would fit, when Mason texted me. He had sent a picture of a turquoise luggage tag and asked if I still wanted it for the beach trip we had joked about for months. I smiled before I answered. Leah saw my face from the table. She asked if that was Mason again. I told her it was, and that he had found the perfect tag because he remembered I hated black luggage. Leah said Mason remembered the fun things, while husbands remembered bills and oil changes. I told her not to be dramatic, but of course my mouth had already joined her side. Anton, my husband, remembered things too. That was the part I kept making smaller. During a clinic audit 6 months earlier, he had sat outside my office with soup because I had forgotten dinner. He had moved to my city after my promotion, started over, and never made it sound like a sacrifice. He said he loved building a life where I could breathe. Once that sounded like devotion. Lately it sounded like walls. That evening I brought the turquoise luggage tag home in my bag. Mason had written his initials on the back with a silver marker, small enough to look like a joke. Anton was in the hallway sorting mail into clean stacks. He looked up when the tag fell from my bag and slid across the floor. He picked it up. He asked softly if something had changed between us. I told him nothing had changed. I said work had been heavy. I said Mason was just being Mason. Anton held the tag between 2 fingers and asked why Mason's initials were on something meant for my suitcase. What he meant was that he could see a door opening. What I heard was that he wanted to check who had a key. I took the tag from his hand and clipped it back onto my bag. Mason's rooftop birthday drinks happened the next Saturday, above a bar that smelled like fried citrus, wet stone, and spilled beer. The wind kept pushing napkins off the high tables, and Mason kept catching them with one hand like he was performing even when nobody had asked him to. That was one of his gifts. He made ordinary things look like scenes someone should remember. The thing is, Mason had been in my life for 12 years. He had known me before Anton, before the clinic promotion, before the apartment with matching towels. He had known me when I still slept on a mattress on the floor and ate cereal for dinner because rent took everything else. He had been there after my last breakup, after my mother cried in my kitchen about losing herself to a man, after I promised myself no husband would ever become the only witness to my life. 2 cheap beers, 1 rooftop table, no crime. That was how I saw it. Mason introduced me to one of his friends as his original girl. He said it lightly, with his arm around the back of my chair, not touching my shoulder but close enough to make the space feel claimed. I laughed because everyone expected me to. Anton had not arrived yet. Leah was beside me, wearing a yellow jacket and smiling like she had been waiting for someone to say the exact wrong thing. She said Mason had earned that title. She said history counted. I told her exactly. I said some people walked in later and expected the front seat. Nina looked up from her drink when I said it. She had worked with me at the clinic before moving into medical billing across town, and she had known Anton since our engagement dinner. She asked if Anton knew I talked about the marriage like assigned seating. I told her not to make it heavy. I said Anton knew Mason came first in my life and that a secure husband should respect what already existed before him. Nina did not answer. She stirred her drink with the little black straw until the ice stopped moving. Anton arrived 20 minutes later because Victor had needed help with an insurance form for their mother. He apologized to Mason for being late and handed him a bottle from the small batch place Mason liked. Mason thanked him, then said Anton was useful in an emergency. People laughed because Mason made it sound harmless. Anton smiled with his mouth. I saw that and decided he was being cold on purpose. Later, Mason pulled a printed Miami Beach tour flyer from his jacket pocket. He said the timing was perfect, and that if we waited any longer, flights would be stupid. He placed the flyer between my glass and Anton's hand. Blue water, white boat, 7 days. Couples and friends welcome, it said near the bottom. Anton looked at the flyer, then at me. He asked if I had already planned this trip with Mason. Specific. Factual. One named thing. I told him it was not planned, only discussed. I said Mason and I had talked about Miami for years, before I was married, before anyone had the right to act betrayed by a conversation. Anton asked why this was the first time he was hearing about a week-long beach trip with another man. What he meant was simple. Why was his wife building travel plans outside the marriage and calling him controlling for asking to see the map? What I heard was old fear. My mother cutting off friends, my stepfather smiling when her phone stopped ringing, a house becoming smaller one quiet rule at a time. So I said the thing that made the rooftop go still. I said Mason had seniority. I said he had known me longer, survived more versions of me, and earned trust before Anton ever put a ring on my finger. Leah laughed first. Not loud. Enough. Mason smiled into his drink. Nina looked at Anton. Victor had arrived by then and stood near the wall holding a bottle of water. His face changed when he heard the word seniority, but he did not interrupt. Anton asked, still calm, if marriage meant he had to compete with a man who had no vows, no bills, and no responsibility for the life we were building. I said a real husband would not compete. I said a real husband would understand that Mason was not replaceable. Someone near the next table dropped a lime wedge. I remember it rolling under Anton's shoe and stopping there. On the drive home, Anton kept both hands on the wheel. The car smelled like his leather jacket and the mint gum he chewed when he was trying not to speak too fast. He asked why I had spent the night at Mason's apartment after our fight 2 months earlier and called it cooling off with someone safe. I told him because Mason was safe. Anton said that was the part that hurt. I heard accusation. I heard ownership. I heard a man trying to turn my oldest friendship into a crime because he had arrived later and wanted the same access. I said Mason had seniority before Anton had vows. Anton did not answer for the rest of the drive. The next morning, Nina sent one message asking if I was okay after the rooftop. I answered with a heart and no words. Leah sent me a link to Miami flights and wrote that some husbands needed to learn that old friendships did not ask permission. Of course, I opened the link. The Miami travel pop-up was held on a hotel roof downtown, which was funny because nobody there was actually in Miami. There were fake palm trees in silver pots, blue lights under the bar, and a huge promotional wall that said, Miami Weekenders, in glossy coral letters. The air smelled like coconut lotion from the sample table and warm sugar from tiny fried dough bites nobody wanted to admit they were eating. The thing is, I trusted rooms like that. I knew how to move through a place built for people to photograph themselves. I knew where to stand. I knew when a laugh should be bright enough to carry. At the clinic, my job was to keep rich people calm while they paid for treatments that promised control over bodies, age, and fear. On that roof, I wanted control over the story. Mason arrived before Anton. Of course he did. Mason liked being early when early made him look chosen. He had the turquoise luggage tag in his hand, the one from my apartment hallway. He had drawn a tiny wave beside his initials now, and he looped it around my wrist like a bracelet. He said we needed matching travel energy if we were going to survive a week of beaches, boats, and bad tourist cocktails. Leah filmed that part. She said it was cute. Nina stood near the bar with her glass lowered, watching but not smiling. Victor was there too because Anton had invited him before the night became strange. He looked uncomfortable in the blue light, like he already knew this was not going to stay harmless. Anton came straight from work, still wearing his dark jacket and the tired face he got when meetings ran long. He kissed my cheek. Mason greeted him like nothing had ever been said on the rooftop. That was Mason's talent. He could leave bruises in a room and come back later with clean hands. Anton saw the luggage tag around my wrist. His eyes moved to it, then to the Miami tour confirmation open on my phone. I had not meant to leave it open. Or maybe I had. It was hard to tell the difference by then. He asked if I had booked anything. I told him not yet. That was almost true. The page had the dates selected, the beach tour added, and one hotel room highlighted because it had a balcony and an ocean view. My thumb had not pressed confirm. Not yet. Was still a room I could hide inside. Mason leaned near my shoulder and said the room would sell out if we kept waiting. He said it like a joke, but his eyes stayed on Anton. Anton asked if we could talk away from the group. Quiet debrief. That was his style when pain became too public. No sharp voice, no show, just a private door offered before the room became a witness. I did not take the door. I told the group that Anton thought marriage meant owning my calendar, my body, and my oldest friendship. My voice came out light at first. People laughed because people always laugh before deciding whether they are safe. Anton said my name once. That made it worse. Softness from him always sounded like a request for me to become smaller. So I went further. I said I was tired of being punished because Mason knew me first. I said Anton wanted to rewrite my life so he could be the first man in every chapter. I said, if he was threatened by a man who had loved me as a friend for 12 years, maybe the problem was not Mason. Leah's phone was still raised, but lower now. Mason smiled, but it was thinner than before. He liked being wanted. He liked being the proof. He did not like rooms where proof became responsibility. Nina turned her glass in both hands. Victor looked at Anton, and not at me. A woman near the sample table stopped pretending not to listen. Anton placed his drink on the nearest high table. His hand was steady. That annoyed me because I wanted him to either fight or apologize. He did neither. He asked again if we could speak somewhere private. I said there it was. I said he could not stand witnesses because witnesses made control look ugly. That was the humiliation. I did not call it that then. I called it honesty with better lighting. Anton's face changed by almost nothing. One small closing of his mouth, one breath through his nose. Then he took his hand away from my lower back and put his wedding ring hand inside his pocket. For 1 second, the rooftop went narrow around me. I saw him standing there, not angry, not jealous in the easy way I wanted. He looked like a man who had just understood that he was not being asked to share space with Mason. He was being asked to accept a lower rank and be grateful for the title of husband. The turquoise tag slid down my wrist and touched my palm. Mason's initials pressed against my skin. There was a small door in my head then. Behind it was one clean sentence. Anton was not trying to erase Mason. He was asking why I needed him erased to prove Mason mattered. I could have stepped through that door. I could have said we should go home. I could have taken the tag off my wrist. Instead, I laughed. I told Anton he was being dramatic. I told everyone that this was what happened when a man confused boundaries with ownership. I turned my wrist so the tag showed better in Leah's half-lowered video and said Miami might be exactly what we needed so Anton could remember I was still a person outside the marriage. Leah stopped recording. That should have told me something. Mason touched the back of my chair and said, maybe Anton needed to learn where he stood. He said it softly, near my ear, but Anton heard enough. So did Nina. So did Victor. Anton picked up his jacket from the back of a chair. He told me he was going home. He did not ask me to come with him. He did not look at Mason. He nodded once to Victor, then walked toward the elevator. Victor followed him after 3 seconds. Nina placed her glass on the bar and told me she hoped I knew what I was doing. I told her I did. Of course I did. I had a room, a witness, a man beside me, and a husband walking away without a scene. At the time, that looked like winning. When the elevator doors closed behind Anton, Mason squeezed my shoulder and said the flights were cheaper before midnight. I opened the booking page again. The apartment was too clean when I came home. Anton cleaned when he was trying not to speak before he was ready. The kitchen counters had been wiped down. The mail was stacked. The blue bowl by the door held our keys, 1 grocery receipt, and the little spare battery Anton kept there because the hallway sensor died every few months. The thing is, order can feel like punishment when you are the reason someone needs it. 2 printed screenshots, 1 dining table. Of course, I called it evidence before he did. Anton had placed the screenshots beside the framed photo from my last birthday. The photo showed me between him and Mason at a restaurant with green walls. Mason was leaning in from one side, Anton from the other. I was laughing. In the picture, it looked like abundance. 2 men who loved me in different ways. No empty space. Anton asked me to sit. I told him I did not like being summoned in my own home. He said he was not summoning me. He said he needed to name the pattern because naming one incident had not worked. That was the S4 version of my husband. Not one text. Not one night. The accumulation. He said I had called Mason safe after sleeping at his apartment. I had called Mason seniority in front of friends. I had called Anton controlling in public. I had left a hotel room open on my phone and told him nothing was booked. Specific. Factual. Too clean. I said he had been collecting things because he knew he could not win emotionally. He looked tired then. Not strategic. Not cold. Just tired in the face and shoulders, like he had been carrying a box alone and had finally set it down. He said he did not want Mason erased from my life. He said he wanted to know whether he still had a place that Mason did not outrank. He said he could not stay married to someone who treated him like a legal detail and Mason like the real home. For a second, I had no answer. So I used the one that always opened the old wound. I told him my mother had cut off people for a husband and ended up with nobody. I said I would not become a woman who gave one man the power to decide which parts of her survived. Anton said he knew that story. He said he had never asked for that power. He had asked for a boundary around a man I kept choosing during our hardest moments. The sentence sat between us. I hated that it made sense. Later, I went to Isabel's kitchen because sisters can be used as mirrors when you expect them to flatter the angle. Her apartment smelled like onions frying and the lemon cleaner she bought in bulk. She was still in work clothes, hair clipped up, one hand on the pan. I told her Anton had printed screenshots like a prosecutor. I said he had turned our marriage into a case file because I wanted to keep my best friend. Isabel did not defend me fast enough. She asked if I had actually planned Miami with Mason after Anton asked me not to. I said I had not booked it yet. She asked if that was the standard now. 1 pan, 2 plates, no sisterly applause. I told her Mason had known me longer than anyone. I said a husband could leave, but history stayed. Isabel turned off the stove and looked at me. She said being known longer was not the same as being loved better. That landed harder because she was not dramatic. Isabel did not enjoy big moral speeches. She liked bills paid and laundry folded and clear dates on calendars. If she sounded worried, it usually meant there was already damage under the floor. I told her she sounded like Anton. She said maybe that should scare me. At home that night, Anton was in the bedroom. The framed birthday photo had been moved from the dining table to the dresser. His wedding ring lay beside it. Not thrown, not hidden, placed. He picked up the frame while I stood in the doorway. He looked at the 3 of us for a long time. Then he turned the photo face down. That was the moment. Not loud, not cinematic, just the soft sound of wood against the dresser. The ring stayed beside it, small and bright under the lamp. A door opened again inside me. I saw briefly how tired he must have been of standing in pictures where Mason leaned closer, and I called it history. I saw that Anton was not trying to cut Mason out of my life. He was trying to stop being cropped out of his own. My hand went to my phone. That was how I closed the door. I took a picture of the turned frame and sent it to Mason. I wrote that Anton had become the villain in a movie he was directing himself. Mason replied with a laughing face first. Then he asked if I was okay. That second message was softer, and I used it like proof. Anton came to the doorway after I sent it. He asked if I was texting Mason about what had just happened between us. I said I needed someone who did not make every feeling a trial. He nodded once. Not agreement. Storage. Then he said if I left with Mason after this, he would handle the rest properly. No legal words, no threats, no raised voice. The tone did the work. I woke before sunrise because leaving is easier when the apartment has not started making sounds yet. The bedroom was grey and Anton was turned away from me, one arm outside the blanket. He looked asleep. I told myself that mattered. Of course, I also told myself I had no choice. The thing is, I had many choices. I chose the ones that made me feel like I was saving myself. 2 folded dresses, 1 beach bag. No crime if nobody wanted to understand the context. The suitcase zipper sounded louder than it should have. I paused after pulling it closed and looked at Anton's back. He did not move. On the bathroom counter, my wedding ring sat in a little ceramic dish beside my face cream. I had taken it off before my shower and left it there because beach water could damage it. That was the clean reason. The other reason was that I wanted my hand to feel like mine in Miami. When I came back into the bedroom, Anton was sitting up. He did not ask where I was going. The suitcase had answered. He asked if Mason was waiting downstairs. I told him the rideshare was 5 minutes away. His face did not change, and that made me sharper. I wanted heat. I wanted proof that this mattered enough for him to lose control. Instead, he sat in the bed he had helped assemble, in the apartment he had moved cities to share, and looked at me like a decision had already moved past both of us. He said he did not need me to erase Mason. He said he needed me not to leave the marriage to prove Mason mattered more. Final and clean. No repeat. No begging. I told him he had waited too long to speak in feelings and only became clear when he started building a case. That was true. Anton did not deny it. He looked toward the bathroom where my ring sat in the dish. He said he had not known how to speak feelings to someone who kept turning every feeling into a public argument. He said he had become organized because words kept disappearing. I heard excuse. I heard strategy. I heard a man trying to look noble after years of quiet absence. I told him Mason never made me feel like I had to defend my own history. Anton said Mason never had to build anything with me that could break. That sentence bothered me, so I picked up the suitcase handle. He said if I walked out with Mason after this conversation, he would stop arguing for his place in my life. I told him maybe that was best, because a place should be earned, not demanded. The rideshare honked once downstairs. Anton did not follow me to the door. At the airport, Mason wore sunglasses on his head and a linen shirt that made him look like he had already stepped into a vacation photo. He hugged me from behind while I checked the departure board. His chin touched my shoulder for half a second. I took a picture of our reflection in the glass because the blue flight numbers made us look like people going somewhere important. I posted it with the caption, "With the person who never made me choose." Leah usually answered in under a minute. She had fed every version of this. She had said old friendships were sacred. She had said husbands like Anton needed consequences. She had sent Miami flight links and little flame reactions and jokes about Anton being a passport control officer in his own marriage. From the departure gate, I sent her the story and wrote that I had done it. 3 dots appeared. Then they vanished. A minute later, she sent 1 grey thumbs up. That was all. I told myself she was busy. Mason bought coffee and asked if Anton had called. I said no. Mason laughed and said maybe peace had finally arrived. His laugh was not as full as it had been on the rooftop. On the plane, he slept before takeoff. I stared at my bare ring finger and turned my hand toward the window so the pale mark did not show. Miami smelled like hot pavement and salt the second the airport doors opened. Mason became easy again in the sun. He carried my beach bag, found the rideshare, made jokes about tourists, and told the hotel clerk we needed the room with the balcony because I deserved the good angle. The room had white curtains and a view of bright water between two buildings. There was one bed. I told myself not to make that detail bigger than it was. Mason tossed his suitcase near the wall and opened the balcony door. He said we had made it. I heard victory. That first day I posted too much. The turquoise luggage tag on the bed, Mason's hand holding 2 plastic cups near the beach, my feet in the sand beside his, a video of him laughing while the wind pushed my hair across my face. I wrote that some people made life feel wide again. Anton did not call, not once. By the second night, Mason started looking at my phone before I posted. At dinner on South Beach, I told him Anton needed to learn that I was not a wife-shaped object he could place where he wanted. Mason said he agreed, but then asked if I had to put every line online. I asked if he was scared. He said he was not trying to be anyone's husband. The words came lightly, but they put a cold edge around the table. I laughed because I needed them not to matter. I said that was why he was safe. He had never tried to own me. He looked away toward the bar where a woman in a white dress was taking pictures of her drink. On the tour boat the next day, he stood farther from me when I filmed. When I leaned into him for a photo, his arm hovered before resting on my shoulder. Small things. Enough to notice. Not enough to accuse. Of course I accused Anton in my head instead. On the last night, I posted the balcony photo. Mason stood behind me, not touching, but close enough that anyone could decide what they wanted. I wrote that some people knew you before the cage and helped you remember the door. Leah did not react. Nina did not view it from her main account, but I saw later that she had seen it. Isabel sent one message asking me to come home before I made this impossible. I did not answer. Mason asked if I could stop using the word cage. I told him he sounded like everyone else. He said he only meant that Anton was still my husband. There it was. Husband. The word arrived late from the man I had used to outrank him. I slept badly that night. Mason slept facing the wall. In the morning, Anton still had not called. I told myself silence meant defeat. By then, silence had already become something else. Airport arrivals smelled like cold air, burnt coffee, and sunscreen trapped in fabric. My shoulders were sunburned under my shirt, and the turquoise luggage tag knocked against my suitcase each time the wheels crossed a seam in the floor. Mason walked a few steps ahead of me, checking rideshare prices. He had been doing that since we landed, like logistics could keep us from standing too close. The thing is, I expected Anton. I expected a wounded face, a hard conversation, maybe one final speech about respect. Of course I had prepared answers. The woman in the grey suit was waiting near baggage claim with a white envelope in both hands. She asked if I was Camilla Reyes. I said yes, and Mason turned his head. She introduced herself as Anton's attorney and said she had been instructed to serve me with a formal petition for dissolution of marriage with temporary financial orders. The first emergency temporary orders hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday at 9:30 a.m. I signed where she pointed because my hand moved before my mind caught up. The envelope was thick. Inside were the petition, a request for exclusive use of the marital apartment, a motion to freeze joint credit accounts, a request for reimbursement of marital funds used for the Miami flights, hotel, and beach tour package, and a notice that Anton reserved the right to bring a civil claim connected to the public posts. There were copies too. The rooftop video, the hotel booking, the balcony photo, the caption about the cage, the airport story where Mason had his arms around me. Nina's written statement said she had heard me say Mason had priority because he had been there longer. I told the attorney this was just friendship and Anton was punishing me for refusing control. She looked at the page in her hand and asked why the caption said Mason never made me choose if no choice was being made. Mason stepped back then. Not far. Enough. The turquoise luggage tag slipped from my suitcase handle and hit the floor. I bent down too fast and dropped the envelope. Papers slid against the grey airport tile, while people moved around us with bags and tired children. Mason texted me from the rideshare lane before I reached him. He said he never asked to be part of my divorce and that I should not mention him again without warning. When I called, it rang once and went to voicemail. Anton received temporary exclusive use of the apartment, and I moved into Isabel's guest room with 2 suitcases. The joint credit card was frozen, and every Miami receipt had to be preserved. Nina stopped answering my messages, Leah never asked to hear the full story, and Victor removed me from the family group chat. Mason sent one final message saying he cared about me, but could not be dragged into court, as the reason. At the clinic, my supervisor asked why clients were tagging the wellness page under screenshots from my Miami posts. The thing is, I went to Miami to prove no man could erase the person I had been before marriage. Of course, I thought Mason was proof that my old self still had somewhere to go, but Anton had been the one building a life with me, while Mason had only kept a door open when it cost him nothing. I mistook seniority for loyalty. The turquoise luggage tag stayed on the airport floor until Isabel bent down and picked it up. I came home from Miami with a tan, a suitcase, and no marriage waiting for me.